The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you from the anomalous state of Pennsylvania. Now, before I start with my guest, I want to mention something that came to me this week. We had talked previously about a Bigfoot sighting in Bald Eagle State Park up in Center County, Pennsylvania. If people that aren't familiar, Center County is actually the county where Penn State is located in State College. And it's been an area where there's been a lot of activity and also upright canine activity as well. So the email I received was the witness stated I have a cabin on the outskirts of Bald Eagle State Park. And I've had a few odd experiences that I could consider to be a Bigfoot. I take my children hiking on an old logging trail on the outskirts of the park. I made a list of the experiences below. During the summer, I crossed over a stream where I found a large footprint along the water. The print was at least 14 inches long, 7 inches wide. And you could clearly see the indents in the mud where there were toes. She had also sent a photograph of it. One separate excursion, we heard unusual vocalizations, chattering noises, like someone was trying to talk and creating their own language. Within that language were distinct sounds that were very human-like. That day we were completely alone on the trail. Now, in the winter, my husband and I decided to walk down the trail to see if the streams on the trail were frozen over. There was snow on the ground, and I know we were completely alone on the trail. On the way back, back to the car, we heard a distinctive whoop, followed by some wood knocks. I made that noise back and heard another wood knock. And then one night this fall, we were in our cabin and opened the window because the fireplace had made the rooms too hot. Laying quietly in the bed, we heard this loud yell that was too loud for a human to make, but wasn't an animal. After this yell, all the coyotes started howling and barking, and it was very strange and a bit scary. The cabin is less than a mile from where we had the initial experiences on the trail. Yeah, I will state the other witness that contacted me a month ago had actually seen this Bigfoot, and I have talked to a couple people since that time, and there have been some sightings in the area. So I'm going to have a couple of my investigators go out there. Sean Forker is going to be going there soon and going to be taking some evidence, seeing what he can find. He's got a friend of his who actually I think has a cabin there as well. Sean lives very close by. He's up in Williamsport. And I don't know if Butch is going to make his trip up there as well. So if we get anything else, we'll let you know about it. And I'll have it posted on the blog. So tonight, I welcome paranormal author and researcher Steve Stockton to Arcane Radio. Now, Steve is a veteran outdoorsman and paranormal researcher who puts together collections of terrifying, odd, and strange encounters. He also references his own personal encounters with the unexplained. Steve studied English language at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and lives in Portland, Oregon. His books include Strange Things in the Woods, a collection of terrifying tales, and My Strange World. From his early years, Steve has had what can be called strange and oftentimes frightening experiences with the paranormal and unexplained. These encounters led him to search for answers, only to discover the truth isn't always easy to find. My Strange World is a collection of Steve's encounters from his personal life, as well as his life as a paranormal researcher. So, Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lon, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
I'm interested to know what started you on this, what experiences you've had, and how did it influence you to start looking into the phenomena?
Yeah, well, it started when I was around 6 years old. I saw my first ghost, full body apparition, and it didn't scare me as much as like, what was that? I knew that wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to see things like that. And that just kind of started me on a lifelong quest of looking into things that basically have no rationale, no explanation.
Mm. So how many experiences have you had?
Dozens.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't think that I necessarily chose the paranormal. I think the paranormal chose me.
Mm.
I'm one of those people, just about anywhere I go, if there's any type of activity there, I will have some sort of experience. It's not always visual. It can be auditory, things like that, or olfactory. I've heard things, smelled things, occasionally see things. But I don't know, just one of those things, man. I've gotten used to it and come to expect it.
Are you an intuitive, or do you have abilities that allow you to sense spirit energy?
I think so. I like to think
Mm.
so. According to my grandmother, I do. My grandmother was on my mother's side. She was a self-styled gypsy witch. She told fortunes and read tea leaves, coffee grounds, animal entrails, the whole bit. They were active in the spiritualism movement from around the turn of the last century, and they held seances and did table tippings or tappings and the whole 9 yards, Ouija boards. So I grew up around it. And according to her, she was present at my birth. I was born with a caul over my face, which is just, it's the afterbirth, part of the amniotic sac that doesn't come away. But in her Southern Appalachian superstitious mind, that marked me as a special child. And that was one of the things that I was supposed to, well, traits or gifts that I had was second sight, intuition, things like that. So according to
Mm.
her, there you go.
Are you from Eastern Tennessee?
Yeah, grew up in the Knoxville, Oak Ridge area.
Yeah, I have family down in Western North Carolina around Roan Mountain, and I'm kind of familiar with the Appalachian folklore and folk magic and such. And I was actually raised here in Pennsylvania, and I was introduced to powwowing a long time ago because I've had family members that were involved with it. So it's kind of the same thing if you actually put the two together.
Yeah,
So
even though she called herself a gypsy witch, in Appalachia, it's really known as a granny witch. That's what
right.
they call them. They made potions and spells and herb concoctions and things. But yeah, I'm familiar with Roan Mountain too. That's interesting place there. You've got Fiddler's Rock. You've got the Jingling Hole, not too far
Mm.
from there, over in Mountain City. There's a cave up there on Roan Mountain that I've heard about. I've never been able to find it, but according to somebody I know that went there, he saw a spider as big as a house cat. So,
Wow.
interesting area.
Yeah, it is. I heard stories ever since I was a kid. I had an uncle. Well, all my grandmother's family was born and raised there. An area called Billadine. I don't know if you're familiar with the town in the area, but everybody moved back up north, and he stayed there my Uncle George stayed there and started a farm, and he actually had a still up on the mountain.
Mhm.
And he used to tell me to talk about this Bigfoot would come through there and tear his still up. You know, he didn't call it a Bigfoot back then, but you know, he said the hairy man would come in there and start tearing up your still. He always talked about that, and you know, me being young, I don't really understand what he was saying, but you know, as years were going by, I've kind of interpreted it as being a Bigfoot.
Yeah, and that's that side of the family. They're from Eastern Tennessee. They're in the Smokies, Cades Cove area in particular, and they had tales going back at least into the 1800s of wild hairy men that lived in the forest, and the Cherokee also talked about.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My great grandmother was born and raised on the reservation at Cherokee, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tales that come out of that area. It really is. It's amazing. But you know, I'll be honest with you, the other kids in the family and my grandmother's brothers and sisters, they really didn't like to talk about it a lot. Now, I don't know what all they experienced. I was talking to Seth Breedlove the other day, and I was telling him that you know, he's got this new the Bell Witch film coming out.
Mhm.
And I was telling him I had a great aunt who experienced a lot of what Elizabeth Bell had experienced, something similar to that, you know. So a lot of those kids had seen that and experienced it in their home back in the early 1900s. So it kind of hit home when I saw it. So it's an interesting story. But you know, it's Southern folklore. You know, you can kind of, you know, you can see it, you know, come up with a lot of different things. But yeah, I think it was. You know, I'm pretty interested to see what you experience as well. Can you kind of go into a little more detail?
Well, I'll just kind of start backwards and then work
Okay.
forward. Not too long after I saw the full body apparition, I had an encounter. Again, it was on our property. We lived out in West Knox County. It was rural or semi-rural at that time. About 2 years later, I would have been around 8, and something chased me in the woods that I wasn't able to see. I could see the
Mm.
effect it was having. It was running and kicking leaves up. I could see the branches and small trees being bent back out of the way, but long there was absolutely nothing there. Scared the daylights out of me. I was within a couple of 100 yards of home, but I was in the woods. We had 26 acres and only about 5 of it cleared off. I ran back down the hill screaming and hollering, making a big commotion. My mom heard me, came out on the back porch to see what was going on. I went past her, went inside and hid under the bed. And my dad and brother got home from work. They went up there and looked, and they could see, where something had ran and the trees were broken and bent. And they would name off things. Well, was it a bear? Was it a dog? Was it, this, that, the other? No, I couldn't see it. I don't know what it was other than it was chasing me. And kind of forgot about that, stayed out of that part of the woods for a long time. Well, flash forward a few years later, I'm 15 years old. We're getting ready to move from there. We'd bought a house a few miles farther up the road, had one built. And I was just kind of out messing around in the woods, taking a look around at some of my old haunts, knowing that I'd probably never see it again, at least not under those circumstances. And I wandered back up to where that ditch was. I stood there and I looked down in the ditch, and I was just thinking, I wonder what that was that scared me when I was a kid. That was weird. And I turned to walk away. Sure enough, I hear something in the leaves again. I whip back around and look. Same thing. 7 years later, it comes up out of the ditch. It's coming straight for me. Can't see it, but I can see the effects it's having on the woods around it. And I didn't run screaming and crying down the hill that time, but I didn't waste any time getting out of there. And
Wow.
years after that, I was at a party with one of those where I'd gone to a party with somebody that I knew only from work. It was just after work, like, hey, come to this party with me. So I went, didn't know him that well, didn't know anybody else there. And some of the girls in attendance had pulled a Ouija board out from under the couch. and they were going around the room asking questions. When they got to me, I thought, I've got a good one for you. And the only thing I said was what scared me when I was a kid, with that in my mind. And I didn't give any more information. I'd never seen those people before, didn't know the guy that I was with even. And it spelled out WATERSPRITE, water sprite. And they looked at me like, what? And I'm just kind of shrugged my shoulders. And they're like, well, maybe it's thirsty. It wants a drink or something. The next day, I went to the library and I had the day off and went to the reference library. And I said, what can you tell me about a water sprite? And then she came back in a few minutes and had a book, and it's an elemental type creature. There's a couple different types. There's one that protects the woods, which is a dryad, and then one that is around water called a naiad. And the strange thing about that, the area of our property where that was, not more than a few 100 feet away, there were 7 natural springs that came out of the hillsides, flowed into one, which went into the lake about a quarter-mile away. So according to the Ouija board, there was some sort of fae or elemental that I'd encountered. And that makes as much sense as anything else I've heard, because whatever it was, I couldn't see it, but it didn't want me around there.
Wow, that's an interesting story. I don't know if I've come across anything like that in particular. I probably have, but I just, I get a lot of different things, but that's interesting. Anything else that you experienced?
Well, we were talking about Cherokee and Cherokee legends and myths, and I've had some Cherokee people chide me before, like, don't talk about those things. You'll draw them to you.
Yeah.
And they fiercely believe that, especially some of the elders. And I'm Cherokee on my dad's side. His grandmother was full Cherokee. And I was over at a friend's house that lived close by this. I would have been about 11 or 12 at this time. And they lived way, way back out in the woods. Their driveway was over a mile long. They liked their privacy. And we were about halfway down the driveway. There was an old shale pit there. And up on the top of the pit, there was a building, little shack, a farm building that was falling down. Wasn't very big. But we're down there in the shale pit just messing around. And about the same time, we both looked up, and there was something looking at us out of the window of this thing. And it was falling down to the point that I don't think a person could have gotten in it. It resembled a horse, except both eyes were on the front of its head, these huge eyes, and it had sharp teeth, unlike the flat teeth that horses have. We both saw it, scared the daylights out of both of us. We tore back up the driveway, and his dad, who was a full Cherokee, he listened to us for a while, and he's like, okay, this is nonsense. I'm going to go down there and see. Took a shotgun, went back down the road. Of course, we stayed at the house. We didn't want anything else to do with it. But we kept waiting. We were listening for a shotgun blast or yelling or something. Didn't hear anything. A few minutes later, he comes walking back up the hill, shotgun over his shoulder. And he had a real concerned look on his face. And he never would tell us if he saw anything or not, but he made us swear. I mean, he was adamant that we would never go back down there and play around that area again. And we didn't. And to this day, I've never been back. And my friend told me a few weeks later that his dad pulled that shack down into the shale pit and burned it down. So knowing what I know now, I think it was some sort of a Wendigo or skinwalker or something like that, just from the way it looked. And I think his dad, being Cherokee, knew what it was and knew that we needed to stay out of there. And I think sometimes that happens. You see things that are actually meant for other people. And that's what my granny used to tell me. So I'd share with her some of the things that I'd seen or experienced. And she said, well, some things are meant for you to see, and some things are meant for other people, and you just happen to see them too. So there you go.
I think that does happen a lot. When a person reports seeing some type of cryptid or such, I think in a lot of instances that person was inclined to actually see it, and others weren't. I think that is something that may happen in a lot of cryptid reports, even Bigfoot and upright canines and such. I think some people are inclined to see it and others are not. I can't really prove that, but I think that does happen.
I feel the same way, especially some of the one-offs, like the Dover Demon or the Flatwoods Monster, things
Hmm.
like that, where it just shows up one time to one or a small group of people, and then it's never seen or heard from again.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Um, so you're from that area in the Appalachians. What are your thoughts on Bigfoot and other types of cryptids like these dog man and such?
Well, I don't really know that much about Dogman. I've never encountered one of those that I'm aware of. I've heard some things in the woods that I always attributed to Bigfoot, but there's something there. I don't know as far as to the origin of it, if it's a species that's unknown to us, if it's something supernatural, if it's from another dimension, but there's definitely something out there. I've never had an actual sighting, but I've heard them, I've smelled them. Once in the Jefferson National Forest up in Virginia, I'd heard the tree knocks and yips and whoops and things. And then I started, and this is about 2 o'clock in the morning. I like to night hike, or used to. I started getting pelted with river rocks, little round, flat river rocks,
Hmm.
and they were just coming out of the woods in different directions. And I didn't really even feel them hitting me. I heard them hitting the ground, and I thought, okay, I'm somewhere where I don't need to be, and I got out of there. But that, just based on other accounts and things, I think that was some sort of Bigfoot encounter.
Hmm. Yeah, I know a lot of people who didn't see whatever it was, but that seems to be the standard operation stopper mo of these Bigfoot, throwing either pine cones or small little rocks and such. Uh, and I've talked to countless people who have experienced that. It's though they didn't see anything, it was coming out of the woods. You mentioned the that previous account with the a possible Wendigo or maybe a skinwalker. I do believe that most of the indigenous tribes have something very similar to that in either their lore or part of their religion. Of course, a skinwalker basically is, if you're talking about the Navajo culture, some a witch that kind of transforms or shapeshifts into another being. And you're right. I have heard a lot of weird stories up and down the Appalachia, and I think there is some indigenous affiliation, Cherokee in particular, even some of the Shawnee and such. I've heard over the years. I think they all have it. I mean, I think the beliefs kind of are very similar through all these groups.
Yeah, it's there, and that's the unusual and interesting to me part about it is you can have a tribe on the other side of the country, and they have a lot of the same stories, a lot of the similar legends and tales. Like I mentioned, the Navajo, I can't remember the name of the tribes, but around the Mount Shasta area in California,
Hmm.
they have creatures they talk about that are made of rock, and they could open up and swallow people and then close back. And you also have a lot of disappearances in that area. Same with Crater Lake here in Southern Oregon. And then, yeah, back east, the Cherokee, and I'm more familiar with that just because of family connections, but they have a legend for everything. They have little people there in the Smokies, the Pukwudgie or whatever you want to call them. Um, and they consider those, they talked about them being the blessed ones or a special race of people, but they still avoided them and didn't want to make any trouble with them. And then you've got legends like Spearfinger, which was kind of a skinwalker type thing. She was could appear as anybody, but often appeared as a grandmotherly old lady that was lost in the woods and wanted you to help her on her way home. And then she had a piece of obsidian for one of her index fingers, and she would cut your liver out and eat it, and that'd be the
Mm,
last they ever heard of you.
yeah, that's
So
interesting.
lots of interesting legends. And then there on the north shore of Fontana Lake, there's a Cherokee legend about a pond somewhere there near the lake where a deer had waded out into the pond, and the pond started swirling, pulled the deer down into it, and then all that came back up was bits of fur and cartilage and bone. So something big in that pond that likes to consume deer. And that's the other interesting thing. All those areas in the Smokies, the ones that have the most activity, which basically is Cades Cove and the North Shore of Fontana Lake in that area, those are also the places where people have gone missing. Cades Cove area, Mount LeConte, Dennis Martin, Trini Gibson, Thelma Pauline Melton. I don't know. It's all kind of somehow related. I don't know if you believe in string theory or something that way, but there are almost 40 in connections with everything there, the legends, the disappearances, the little people, the wild hairy men, and there's elements of each one of those in a lot of the disappearances and things.
Yeah, people may not realize, but the Smoky Mountains, that area in particular, there have been a lot of disappearances of people for whatever reason. I know when this 411 phenomena started getting out there in the mainstream, people were talking about it, in particularly about the state parks or some type of either federal land or such. But really, over the past century or so, there have been a lot of disappearances up in the Smoky Mountains. I people attribute it to a lot of different things, but a lot of these disappearances were people that were there and then they just weren't. They suddenly disappear, or there have been cases where lots of lights have been seen. Now, I'm not talking about the Brown Mountain lights, but other areas in the Smoky Mountain area where these lights would be seen, possible abductions, So there's been a lot of weird stuff that's happened in that area.
Kind of all ties in together. And I talked to an older gentleman one time up in the Smokies who was telling me a story about he was out, I think he was possum hunting or coon hunting or something at night. And this was before they had electric lights and things, or at least rudimentary ones. And he was using the old carbide light on a hat, like a miner's helmet. And he ran out of carbide and was lost in the woods in the dark. And he saw a light off in the distance. He thought it was another hunter. So he's trying to get to the light. He notices it's moving. So he's just following it. And one place he said that it crossed over a little gap. And when he went to cross that gap, he fell off like a 12-foot little bluff or cliff there. And he didn't break his ankle, but he twisted it pretty good, jammed his gun down in the ground and stuff. And he said, Steve, I know I watched that light walk. He said, it looked like somebody carrying a lantern. It walked across that area and I just went right along behind it and I fell off. And when he went back in the daytime to get his rifle and stuff, which he couldn't even find in the dark, he said there was no way that anything human could have walked across there. And I've heard other stories like that there are, if you want to call them spook lights or fairy lights or ghost lights or whatever, those are prevalent in the Smokies. And a lot of the Cherokee attribute it to the little people. And if they like you, they can lead you out of the woods. But if you've done something to anger them or upset them, they can lead you off into the woods. And that's part of the legend, is you're disappeared and you're never heard from again.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of that over the years. Occasionally a story from up there will make the media or be on the show or such, but there have been a lot of disappearances over the years. I even from people from my family had talked about disappearances where someone just vanished and just never showed back up, and it does happen. It's interesting. I got involved in a lot of cases with alien experiencers and such, and we're in even one instance where a person I had been involved with, who I just started working with, that had been experiencing possible alien UFO activity, just simply disappeared. She never showed. She was gone, completely vanished.
Yeah.
And that's something that kind of weighs on you after. Well, it's been about a decade for me. That was actually out in eastern Washington near the Idaho border. That was a strange story. So you're out in Portland now. which I consider weird central, to be honest with you, because I've gotten a lot of things out there over the years, in particularly, and of course people know about the Bigfoot phenomenon, but and of course the show Grimm being out of there didn't help much either.
Yeah.
You know, but I had been getting more recently a lot of alien type being sightings and interactions. Can you tell us some of the stuff that you've either experienced or heard about up in that area?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here in Portland right now, so I don't get out as often as I used to and explore.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of purportedly haunted places here. You've got the Shanghai tunnels, you've got the Pittock Mansion, you've got Cathedral Park, and some of these hauntings go back hundreds of years, and or over 100 anyway. And there's not a lot of UFO sightings here that I'm aware of. I know there are some, but it's get into that more when you get over just across the river into Washington State. You've got the Gifford Pinchot National Forest there, and again, it's a hotbed. It's got UFOs, it's got Bigfoot, it's a little bit of everything. And then just a little bit farther up than that, Mount St. Helens. I can see Mount St. Helens from my driveway on a clear day where I live. And there you've got the Ape Caves, and that's the same area where the Ape Canyon attacks happened, if you remember those from the 1900s, early 1900s. And I saw something the other day where there's a paranormal group, I think they're from California. They think they've located that cabin where the remains of it, where the Ape Canyon attacks happened. And if anybody not familiar with it, it was some miners that got trapped in their cabin by, again, what they described as a group of hairy wild men. And they were attacked by boulders, and the hairy men were trying to get in the cabin, even reaching through the cracks. One of them reached in and grabbed an axe and tried to pull it back out. And one of the gentlemen, I can't remember his name, he claims to have shot one of them up on a cliff or bluff, and it fell a couple hundred feet down into a canyon there. And so the thinking of this paranormal organization is, if this is the cabin, then somewhere, if we can find this canyon, there might be a skeleton there of whatever it was he shot. Now, it's been, 80 years or more ago, so who knows, but be worth a look, I think. And there's, again, it's mostly Bigfoot and things out here, but a little bit farther up beyond that area, you have East City Ranch. I don't know if you're familiar with that up there or not. It's
the Yosemite Ranch. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now they have regular sightings there. They've had UFO sightings. I know a person went there that had some sort of dogman encounter that basically saw what looked like a portal open, and a dogman just comes strolling out on two legs and just continues on nobody's business. And the UFO, Bigfoot, everything there. I've never had a chance to go up, but I'd like to go there sometime.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about Mount Adams and also Mount Shasta and such. Actual openings up on the mountain where UFOs would fly out, craft would fly out. You hear a lot of that.
Shasta is something else. I've been down there a few times, and there's just a weird energy there. There's people claim that there's a vortex or a series of portals or something there. It's other places where I've felt that are like in Sedona, Arizona, Joshua Tree, California. And then there's the Oregon vortex just across the state line there around the Crater Lake area. But yeah, Shasta, there's all kinds of strange things that go on there. Disappearances, sightings of people in robes, the stories of the Lemurians, and people that live inside the mountain in the tunnels. And then also there's supposedly bunkers with equipment and things in there. And then one of the stories we covered on Missing Persons and Mysteries was the robot grandma, where a little boy went missing in the woods, and they eventually found him. And a few days later, he tells this story that he's looking at his grandma, and he said, "I like you better than the other grandma." And she thought he meant the other parent's mother. And he said, "No," he's like, "I'm talking about the robot grandma." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You remember when I was lost in the woods He said, "You came to get me, but it wasn't you. It was a robot, but it looked like you." And according to the little boy, this robot grandma took him into a cave there on Mount Shasta, and he recalls seeing old swords and guns and cannons and things with cobwebs on them. And she tried to get him to use the bathroom on a piece of paper, and he wouldn't do it. And she got very angry with him and took him back and let him go. And then that was in the area where they found him the next day. And
Mm.
then the odd thing about that, the grandma that he had told this to, she had had an encounter in the same area of Shasta prior to this, where she had woken up like the next morning outside her tent, didn't know how she got there, and had some sort of puncture wound on the back of her neck. So there's some strange stuff going on Mount Shasta and in the nearby town of Weed, California. There's a lot of New Age centers, a lot of
Yeah.
meditation and alternate religions things. It's an interesting place to visit. It's a lot like Sedona.
Yeah, I got a friend who goes out there almost every year on a retreat, and you talk about these new age centers, he's involved in some of that. But yeah, I've heard a lot of weird stories out there over the years. It's, I used to, I would dig up the old accounts. Of course, back then, back in the 1800s, the newspapers accounts would be embellished to a degree. They weren't like they are now,
Yeah.
though we do get some now. But I do remember one in particular where there was a woman and her friend who were on a train, and they were going by Mount Shasta, and she talks about the Bigfoot up on the mountain throwing things at the train as it was going by. I had another woman tell me she was on a train near Mount Shasta and saw Bigfoot out in the fields, in the foothills. And you talked about the Lemurian legends. Yeah, that's a whole new ball game right there.
That's a deep rabbit hole right there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
Count Saint Germain that's been encountered on the mountain supposedly, and then he had channeled his religion to I can't remember. There was a guy back in the 20s or 30s or something that basically started a religion based on knowledge he had gained on Mount Shasta, and had one time like 2 million followers.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that I have talked to over the years that swear that there are portals there. They have experienced lost time, but have also experienced where they believe they have gone back into time, time travel, and such. It's kind of bizarre. And you're right. There are so many hot spots, especially here in the United States. It just seems to be certain areas for whatever reason, if it's geology or just some type of energy vortex or something that causes a lot of different phenomena to be seen. And of course, out in your area, there just seems to be a lot of it.
Yeah, from basically here all the way up from Northern California, all through Oregon, up to Washington, up to the Canadian border there. I mean, you've got weird stuff
Yeah.
all through there. Up in like Seattle, you've got the SeaTac hum, they call it, which you also have in Taos, New Mexico. There's this hum that
Hmm.
sounds like a machinery or a dynamo or something that kicks on. It's underground, but nobody knows what it is. They can feel it. And you're talking about the geomagnetic anomalies and things. I was talking to Nathan Isaac the other night. He was in season 2 of Hellier, and he has a podcast called Pity Royal. And he was talking about the geomagnetic anomaly. They're called the Kentucky anomaly, where
Mm.
it's one of the few places in the world where all this weird magnetic stuff happens. There's been meteor strikes there. It's close to where they saw the Kelly Hopkinsville goblins. It's close to Hellier. It's close to all these other things that have gone on there. So is that something that's drawing stuff there, or is it the stuff that's going there causing that? I mean, there's so many different ways you can go with that. Just it boggles the mind.
Yeah, I mean, there are places, and I live in Pennsylvania, but there are places like that here where you just constantly hear of strange occurrences in these areas. But then again, Just like now you're up in the Pacific Northwest, and of course everybody knows that area for the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena.
Mhm.
But I do believe, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I do believe that the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch that are seen up in that area are actually indigenous beings. I don't believe they may be supernatural, though I believe that phenomena is supernatural in some places. I think that they and other cryptid beings may very well be some type of interdimensional beings. Or or just like the winged humanoids we've been involved with in the upper Midwest. I think that's very likely some type of interdimensional being. But up there in your area, I do believe most of those are indigenous, because you do get a lot of reports with family pods or family groups.
Mhm.
Just not one singular being just seen all the time.
Yeah.
There's something else associated with it.
Yeah. I tend to agree. And it's almost like the ones that you see in other parts, maybe they migrated or followed a path or something, and they've kind of changed or evolved and adapted to their area. But you don't
Mhm.
hear as much about I've heard stories out here, people seeing female Bigfoot with nursing a young. I think that might have been on Mount Shasta and
Mhm.
things like that. Now, as far as any winged humanoids, I haven't really heard of any out here, but that really seems to be popping off back east. I've subscribed to your email newsletter, and it's like almost every day or every other day, there's another report of a winged humanoid coming in. Some of them are older, of course, but that's just fascinating. I mean, I know about Mothman and some of that, but I'd love to know what's going on with that. What's if that's becoming more prevalent, or if it's just one of those things that people are more aware of it. One of the things we do on Missing Persons and Mysteries, we let listeners send in their stories, and then I narrate those in a compilation. And
Mhm.
we're seeing more and more Glimmer Man stories,
Oh yeah.
the predator type creature. And again, is it one of those things where it's more people are aware of it and they realize they've seen it, or they've heard other stories and they're willing to come forward and tell theirs? I had an encounter with something like that in downtown Portland, Oregon, one night about midnight. I was waiting on a train. I was the only one. It was the last train of the night. I was the only one at the stop, and I saw something over between a signpost and a garbage can, and it was like the shimmer. And I thought, well, is that like heat coming out of the? Because it wasn't really that cold, and I thought, is that like heat coming out of a steam vent or a grate or something? I walked over there to where I could see it a little better, and there's nothing there, but I could still see this outline. Now it was roughly humanoid in shape, but it wasn't very tall. It was only about 4 feet tall. But when I was looking at it, it sort of hunkered down or squatted down. And I just like every hair on my body stood up. And I thought, this isn't a good thing. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make my exit here. I ended up crossing the street against the light, and the car had to slam on its brakes. So I ran to get out in front of the car and hoping whatever it was wouldn't chase me, and it didn't. But those stories are becoming more and more prevalent, and people are seeing them in cities and just outside of the country. Whereas the early reports, it was in the woods in heavily wooded areas.
Mhm.
Had a story in the compilation before last. A lady in New Jersey and her little boy saw one in a tree. And this is not a really rural area in New Jersey, but it's not deep woods by any means.
This Glimmer Man phenomena has been turning up more and more recently. Now, I don't know why. I don't know if it was like you said, because of the Predator movie, people are actually noticing it, and it's been there all along. I believe that there's a good possibility that these are some type of cryptid cloaking. You know, I got a case reported to me from Oklahoma over the past month or so, and this individual was talking about seeing all kinds of weird phenomena. And one of the investigators on my team, Ryan, he drove out there about, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago, and he collected some evidence while I was out there. And we'll be posting it up on my blog in sometime soon. But he actually caught a photograph of this glimmer effect, this glimmer being up in the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, it's one of the better photos I've seen of this phenomena. And there's definitely something there. But I have talked to a lot of people that have seen this, and I think most people believe it's a cloaked being of some type, be it alien. Is it an alien just like in like for the movies?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is, but
And then I've also seen video of like from battlefields where soldiers seem to be using that kind of technology too. So is it something like that? Is it something our government has or somebody else's government has, or is it an alien technology that we've somehow reverse engineered and nobody knows about? Or is it, something supernatural? It could be all the above or any of the above. That's the thing about it. It kind of like some of the other stuff, it just overlaps and doesn't fit into one pigeonhole really neatly.
It's interesting because, like I said, it's something that has, it's fairly new, but there have been investigators I have talked to for years who are just starting to get reports like this as well. The overall sense was early on, well, too many people watching the movie, and believe me, that's what they're seeing. But some of the, I heard Bruce Maccabee talk not long ago about he actually experiencing one of these glimmer men out near his home. This phenomenon is turning up. Now, what's behind it? Well, I guess that's we got to figure out at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Bruce's wife, Jan, saw one when she was deer hunting. She was up in a tree stand, and she's got a picture of it. It wasn't a very good picture. It might even be video, but I've seen stills from that, and there's absolutely something there. And at the same time as her sighting, not too far away, there was a marching band practicing on a football field, and they had some sort of UFO sighting or encounter. So it kind of goes hand in hand with, even though they were technically unrelated and close to each other, the UFO sighting and this strange glimmer creature at the same time.
It's interesting, when you're involved with the paranormal, it's interesting some of the stuff that turns up. This Glimmer Man thing. Now, another thing that's been more prevalent in the past decade are these pale humanoid beings.
Mm-hmm.
People call them flesh gates, rakes, or whatever you want to call them. But it was something that would occasionally turn up in a report. But now we're getting them everywhere. I mean, even here in Pennsylvania, we've got a couple of cases we're actually looking into now. But people, some people say, "Well, it's a Wendigo," or but what they're describing is an actual flesh and blood being, and they just seem to pop up here and there. Are they some kind of manifestation of a spirit or such? I don't know. It's hard to tell, but some of the evidence is pretty compelling as to what these things, what are people seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, like the night walkers, if you've ever seen any of that footage,
Right,
that they've tried to debunk, but then it's been seen in other places too, almost the same exact thing. And I've had some Native Americans tell me that I can't remember the term that they used, but that's something that they're aware of, that it's some sort of bad mojo for them.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, we've when we started getting reports of upright canines and dogmen and all that, I thought, but quite honest, when I started getting into this, I mean, I wasn't getting any of those type of reports, but now it seems to be part of everything. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on how the paranormal and all the genres are connected, but I believe there's definitely a connection. We get so many reports where two different things are seen at the same time, say Bigfoot and UFOs, or another cryptid and light phenomena. It all seems to be, I mean, and more becoming something that's connected somewhat.
Definitely. And then take, for example, Skinwalker Ranch,
Mm-hmm.
UFOs, Dogman, the Super Wolf, Bigfoot type creatures, portals. Again, it's all just kind of, that's like a potpourri of the paranormal right there, just in that one little spot there in Utah.
Mhm.
And there was one story out of there where the lady was looking out her kitchen window, saw a portal open up, and there was somebody sitting at a desk, like with, I don't know if it was a typewriter or doing something, some kind of work. And so the guy, I think he looked up at her, and then the portal just closed back and was gone. What in the world is that? Is there some sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Bluebeam or things like that, where they
Mhm.
supposedly have the ability to beam things into your head that you think you see, but you really don't. Is there some kind of technology like that at work? And the same with the Glimmer Man. I wonder how that ties in with some of these people that have gone missing from, say, bars, where they have video of them going in, and there's security cameras everywhere, but there's no video of them ever coming out, and then they're never seen again. Same in the UK, the Manchester area, the pusher, they call it. Somebody's putting people in the canals. And again, and if you've ever been to the UK, they have more surveillance cameras per head than anywhere in the world.
Everywhere.
And yet
Everywhere.
there's not one single frame of anybody shoving somebody in one of the canals there in Manchester. They see them going into a pub, and then the next thing you know, they find the body in the canal. So maybe it's like the Shanghai tunnels out here. There's some kind of underground way that they're dropping them down through a tunnel and sending them out into the canal. But what would be the point in that?
The only place that I can really recall that happening that I got involved with was in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's a college town,
Mhm.
and these kids would hang around the bars that was close to this area of the city where there were a lot of bars and such. Area close to the parks beside the Mississippi River. And in the past, I don't know, 12 years or so, there have been at least 20 people that have died, young people that have died and been found in Mississippi in that area. They have no explanation for it. Somebody would see one of these kids go into the pub, be drinking with them or socializing with them. And, the first thing you think is when the body turns up, well, they were drunk and made a bad step somewhere. Well, I mean, they just don't really have any explanation for it. Now, there were a few that were associated to the happy face killer, where they saw the happy face had been drawn nearby.
Mhm.
But that was only just a few of them. But there have been many more. That's a strange
Yeah, and
bunch of cases out there.
I've heard people, put that in with the missing 411 stuff. Oh, that it's serial
Yeah.
killers or it's just that. But if it is, they're 100% successful, and they don't leave behind any evidence, not a shred. So I don't see that. I mean, I can see how some of them could be that way, and that's the thing. There is no really hard and fast thing that everything fits, but everything kind of fits a little bit of all the different theories. It could be a government, it could be aliens, it could be something extraterrestrial or from another dimension. It could be serial killers. It could be who knows what. But there's definitely something going on out there.
Yeah, you start to wonder whether there's paranormal serial killers out there. you know, I mentioned the Grimm shows that were on, and supposedly based out of Portland. That was pretty wild stuff, that show. Anyway, it was funny how they used to incorporate actual uh, lore in the paranormal into that show. And if you took it seriously, you'd think, wow, there's a lot of weird stuff. And there is a lot of weird stuff that goes on out there. I know that for a fact. But I let me ask you this: have you experienced anything bizarre since you've lived out there?
Well, the glimmer person thing that I talked about
Right.
downtown. I had another weird thing happen at an old Victorian house that I lived in for a few years out here. Back in the 90s, I had a black eyed kids encounter. And I,
Really?
yeah, and that's one of the ones I don't talk about too much. I'll occasionally tell it. And the first time I ever told it publicly that night, and on that house, I had security cameras, I had perimeter alarms, I had everything. I would know if somebody were even close to the house. But that night, after I told that story for the first time on the air, I had a knock on the door about 3 a.m. And again, it didn't trip any of the alarms, it didn't trip any of the cameras or anything. And then there was a scream. Sounded like it started on the front porch, came all the way through the house, continued screaming, and went out the back door. And I thought my daughter had had something terrible happen to her. She was living with me at the time. I ran to her room and flung open the door. She's sound asleep. And I said, "Did you hear that screaming?" And she said, "I told you not to talk about those black-eyed kids." But had that happen out here.
Mm.
I think what else? There's a place here out in the county called the Troll Bridge that I've got a video on my 13 Past Midnight channel about that. It's more just like a creepy legend type thing, but there's definitely a presence there. It's a disused railroad trestle where years ago somebody started putting these little troll dolls on it, the ones with the spiked up multicolored hair.
Hmm.
And just depending on when you go there, there may be a few dozen up to a few hundred of them. And people have even climbed way up into the trestle and put them up there. And legend says that if you bring one and put it there, it's good luck. But if you take one, it's bad luck. And I talked to a lady who swore that she had stopped there one time. There was one on the ground, and instead of putting it back on the bridge like you're supposed to do, she took it home with her. And then she started having all this unexplained phenomena happen. She would hear giggling and little feet and find things moved around in her house. She lived alone. She didn't have any pets. And finally, she decided it was the curse of the troll doll. She took it, put it back on the bridge, and the activity stopped. So I don't
Hmm.
know. Is that one of those things like a tulpa where just thinking about it and putting that energy out there can bring it back to you? Or
Possibly. You know, you hear a lot about things like that.
and
Um,
I've had some time slips out here too, a couple of
oh,
times
have you?
where I was, I think that's what it was. I was downtown once, and this is in broad daylight, and I was just turning a corner to go around a building. I think it was a bank or something there, big building. And just as I turned the corner, there was a guy coming the other direction, turning the corner, and he had on like 1800 style clothing with a, it wasn't an Abe Lincoln style hat. It wasn't that tall, but it was kind of a top hat type thing.
Hmm.
And just as I turned the corner, I thought, wow, I want to get a look at that. I thought it was, maybe a cosplay or, somebody into steampunk or something. I
Hmm.
only made a few steps. I turned right around, went back around the corner. No sign of the guy anywhere. And that side of the street, there was no entrances or anything to the building other than windows that were all closed and nothing on the other side. There was no way he could have gone anywhere in that short a time. So I don't know if I slipped or if he did or if it was a ghost in broad daylight or what. One of those things that makes you wonder.
Well, Steve, before we go, I want you to tell folks how they can get a hold of your books and what productions you have and how other things involved with either YouTube or your Facebook or a
Oh,
website.
absolutely. My books are available on Amazon and whoever find books are sold. My publisher told me to say that. Got Strange Things in the Woods. And that's actually my first two books combined. I used to have Strange Things in the Woods and More Strange Things in the Woods. That's both combined into one. And then the other book that's also out in paperback is My Strange World. The first one, Strange Things in the Woods, that's stories that I've collected from friends, family, friends of family, that type thing over the years. And My Strange World, those are an account of some of my personal experiences. That's as much as I could fit in one book. But yeah, they're on Amazon or like I said, wherever you buy books, paperback, ebook, and Strange Things in the Woods is in an audible version. I'm on YouTube. I have 13 Past Midnight, which is my personal channel where I narrate things from my books and some of my other encounters and a little bit of everything on there. There's some fiction and stuff on there as well. And then Bill Melder, who's in the chat there as Missing Persons and Mysteries, we do that channel together. We cover, looks like it says missing person cases. And then on the mysteries side of that, we use that as a lot of leeway and cover anything mysterious. We have cryptids and other things on there. So missing persons and mysteries. I'm on Facebook, Steve Stockton 81, and I'm on Twitter. Strange and Odd is my Twitter handle, and I love to hear from folks. And my email address is all over the web. It's in the back of all my books.
Before you go, I got a question here from Ryan, who wants to know if you have any accounts dealing with Men in Black.
I've never had a Men in Black encounter. I know about them like from the research that Keel did about them and things. And
Yeah,
again, it's sort of like this trickster figure. And if you look, starting back like around the Men in Black and then going forward, then a few years later you had the Phantom Clowns. Then you had the Black-Eyed Children.
yeah.
And, it's like there's something out there that tries to entice people or talk to people or interact with people, but they don't get it quite right. The Men in Black, they wear nice clothes and they drive nice cars, but they speak weird and they look like robots. Well, Phantom Clowns, who doesn't like clowns? But these are scary clowns that come out of the woods and chase you. And Black-Eyed Kids. Oh, well, we'll send kids out to interact with people. Everybody likes kids, but these are weird little kids with jet black eyes that talk weird and do weird things. So if I ever disappear, it was probably the black-eyed bikini models with pizza and heavy metal albums that I let in. And
Well, Steve, thanks again for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to have you come back. You'd get another book out, and we'll talk again.
Sure. I just got a contract for 3 more, so I'll have some coming up within a few months.
Sounds good. You
Thanks.
Take care now.
Have a good night, everybody.
Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Fans of Monsters blog site. If you're interested in supporting Fans of Monsters or Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons or links on the blog and newsletter. We have a few things going on. We got a GoFundMe page for David Eckhart. We're trying to buy some equipment for him so he can continue to get better alien images at his home and his research. Dave is also part of the Fans of Monsters Fortune research team now. And he's going to be getting involved with a few cases that we are constantly getting. I'm going to be on Coast to Coast next Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. You can hear me on there. That'll be interesting. I've been on there several times now. And it usually is very fruitful as far as getting cases coming my way. So hopefully that'll be the case again. And the Beyond Explanation membership, you can become a member of this channel on YouTube and get a lot of different perks, a lot of premieres before everybody else gets them. We got some things coming up very soon. Get on board. It's very, very cheap, $2.99 a month. And, be able to see a few things, hear a few things before everybody else does. And we're going to have discounts on merchandise when that starts. So, become part of the team. I want to again thank Steve Stockton for coming on this evening. And I want to thank you for listening to the show. Just stay healthy. Have a safe, enjoyable weekend. Good night.